In fictional thriller novels, after some shit goes down, they will always have this scene at some point where law enforcement officials or corporate brass hold a meeting, and it seems like every time during such a meetings, they will summarize for the readers what they've been doing to help solve the crime or catch the bad guy or fix some sort of trouble. Basically, just like the detective says here, I want to know where we stand and where we're going. If anyone's got any bright ideas, I want to hear them. Those two phrases really summarize the purpose of such chapters. Now it falls upon me to write one of these kinds of chapters. Basically, there is a police investigation. It involves James Grider. It involves a teacher arrested for sexual abuse of juveniles. And it involves James Grider having murdered a cop. You see, James Grider has this object that he can spawn in his hand, in and out of existence. When it spawns, the object needs to make room for itself. And because it's indestructible, it can rip apart stone and metal if spawned inside such a materials. So basically he can murder anyone by getting within arm's reach of them and spawning this thing inside their bodies. It will tear up all the internal organs and tissues to fit itself, which results in death of the person. And it can't be proven he can do that unless he shows it to the world. So this cop is dead, and I literally have to summarize the conclusions of a medical examiner. And while multiple organ trauma is the cause of death, there's no way for them to know what caused the damage. This is going to be such a challenging chapter to write. I have to depict adults speaking in an official meeting. Good thing I have plenty of novels to look at where that kind of shit goes on. There would be a detective, a deputy chief of the police department, the district attorney, the police pathologist, and who knows what other professionals, all sort of sharing that information to each other. There is a scene like that in Tyrannosaur Canyon. It's very short. Mine is going to be infinitely longer because the problem is much more complicated. But I've never written anything like this. It's outside my comfort zone to write about adults instead of teenagers. Now, the beginning part here in Tyrannosaur Canyon where the cop throws away his cigarette and walks into headquarters, I could plagiarize this part from this book, like these few paragraphs in the beginning. I just have to change the name of the detective and the name of the case. But then all the conversations that follow have to be my own, because the situation in my book has nothing to do with the situation in Tyrannosaur Canyon. But what's great is that I can actually steal this snippet of writing for myself, where the chapter starts. See, this is what I have decided to do to be a better writer. I go through books, and I highlight phrases and descriptions I wouldn't think to use myself, or even little scenes that I could incorporate into my novel. This basically makes me a plagiarizing hack. Let's say one day I needed to write about a generic boat captain, for example. And I'd be like, so what is he going to look like, and what might his history and attitude be? Well, Dirk Pitt books have described so many generic sea captains that why not just literally steal the paragraph or the few sentences I will need for myself? I listened to some Dexter books, and then I realized that so much of Dexter's thought process can be used for my James Grider character, like descriptions of sensations he feels, because they're both kind of like outlaws in similar positions. So, if it's written that Dexter thinks of himself as dear, irreplaceable me, hey, I could use that and have my character think exactly the same thing. I have this theory that everything you need to write in an original story has been written by someone else already, and you could literally copy and paste snippets of writing by random authors, just changing the necessary details, and then put all those snippets together, creating your very own book, without having to do any original writing yourself. It's a crazy theory, but it might be one that is very possible. Despite that, I'll still end up doing 99.9% of the writing myself, because it's just the way it is. I am not aware of every book in the world. But if you were aware of every book in the world, I think you could literally find everything in every book that has already been created to write and describe the things that you need in your original story. I have borrowed a description of a sex scene from a Dean Koontz book, changing a few words so it sounds original, but I wasn't satisfied with what was there and went ahead and added details because I want to gross people out because it's a 15-year-old boy having sex with a 26-year-old woman. And I want people to kind of see what they're doing to each other. But it was nice to borrow some of the adjectives and certain descriptive phrases without having to think them up myself. The story is still my own, but literally, once you've consumed a ton of books, you can go through them and recall what scenes you could use to apply that to your own work. Like, you want to describe a fist fight or a sword battle. Well, fuck. A bunch of somebodies have probably written that shit already, over and over, many times. Just peruse their crap and borrow that writing. You could even borrow from multiple authors and put it together into your own thing. I wouldn't have thought of the term idiot hope, for example, but I heard it in a book, and I took note of it, and then I knew there is a place in my book where I could use it, so I went and inserted it in. See, to make it in this world, you really have to be a dirtbag. You can have your pride and decide you will never do this, you will never use someone else's work to augment your own, so you appear equally as skilled with the language, but you will lose out in the end. Fuck, there's a description of the New Mexico desert in so many of Douglas Preston's books that if plot ever calls for me to use that setting, damn right I will try to tap into that treasure chest. Why should I waste my time struggling to come up with my own original way to convey that shit? I would see questions online where aspiring writers would ask how to describe a kiss in a book or a sword fight. Here is the secret. Most kisses in books aren't described. They're just kisses. If your characters need to kiss, just find a book where some characters kiss and rewrite that. Gunfights, fistfights, sex, terror, and love, all that shit has been described again and again in literature. Why suffer by rebuilding this crap from scratch for your story? They can't hit you with copyright abuse, because you're plagiarizing so little, such an insignificant amount, and the plot of the story is your own, that they can't harm you for stealing a paragraph or two. You could just claim parody, and there is nothing they can do. Here people get mad that Infinite Warfare is a copy and paste of Black Ops 3 and Ghosts. Yeah, it is, idiots. Why in the hell, if they have made a dozen games already, why would they build a new game from scratch? You'd spend thousands of extra man-hours on redrawing a wheel on a car, or redrawing a crate or a tree or a house from scratch, when you already have that shit. Get the fuck out of here. I saw a map in Infinite Warfare that takes place on Mars. Shit looks like it could have been copied straight out of Destiny, and probably was. People get upset at Activision for ripping off their own work. You pay full price for that bullshit, as if they put as much work into it as they would have had into the very first Call of Duty for PS3, where they had nothing under their belt to copy and paste yet. Now imagine if you actually become a famous author. I don't know how people would take it when they read a paragraph in your book and say, "What the fuck? This is exactly the paragraph in this other book. Did you copy and paste a description of a fucking sea captain from Clive Cussler? Dude, you're such a douche." Then a publisher would say, no, we can't accept your work. If you boast that you plagiarize, we can't accept the culpability of some kind of lawsuit or something. Take yourself and your shit book and get the fuck out of here. You're so pathetic, you can't even come up with a description of a one-dimensional boat captain character that has no impact on the story, and you have to copy that from someone else. Get the fuck out of here, you fucking douche. And again, I will feel the victim. I will feel the reject. And I will hate life. And I will use this to justify every evil belief that crosses my mind. This kind of copying and pasting is like if you were building your own video game and you literally just Frankensteined it from pieces of existing games. Not just the code, but actual objects like buildings and shit. Like if you just took Grand Theft Auto map elements and like grabbed some buildings and terrain out of it and rearranged the pieces to like create a map in Call of Duty. This is the kind of shit I'm talking about.